So welcome everyone to today's presentations. If folks could mute until you have a question or have a moment to speak, just to make sure our sound systems are working. So welcome to Library as Key Partner in Open Pedagogy Part 2. Today's presentations are one in a series that have grown out of the book Open Pedagogy Approaches, a project led by Kim Hoffman, one of today's author presenters, and Alexis Clifton. The book brings forward collaborations between faculty and librarians who develop educational approaches based in open educational resources and open pedagogy. Today's presentations in particular grow out of the last section of the book, which specifically addresses open pedagogical design. So open pedagogy here refers to creating a course framework that is designed with flexibility so that students might direct their learning and learning processes as they work toward a final product or end product. Open pedagogical design may or may not involve digital work or open educational resources. Importantly, however, it does adhere to the values of open pedagogy. So today, as you can see, we have two presentations by authors of chapters in the Open Pedagogy Approaches book. First, authors Denise Malloy and Sarah Siddiqui will present Invitation to Innovation, Transforming the Argument-Based Research Paper to Multimodal Project. So this work demonstrates extremely well how altering and adding flexibility to the assignments and assignment structure in a theme-based writing course puts students in charge of their writing, their learning, and their creative processes in ways that align with the values of open pedagogy. Denise Malloy is an assistant professor in the Writing, Speaking, and Argument program at the University of Rochester. After nearly 2 decades of teaching experience, she is enthusiastic about the possibilities that OER brings to her writing classroom. Zara Siddiqui is a science and engineering outreach librarian at the University of Rochester's River Campus Libraries. She is interested in the trends and developments in scholarly communications, the research life cycle, and accessibility of resources. She received her Master of Science in Information Science from University at Albany in 2018. For the second half of today's session, authors Kim Hoffman, also University of Rochester, and Amanda Spence, New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, will present What If We Were to Go? Undergraduates Simulate the Building of an NGO from Theory to Practice. This work offers a powerful example of how course redesign driven by open pedagogy creates authentic, student-driven learning that alters how and what one learns and how one works and lives within a community. Kim Hoffman serves as the University of Rochester's head outreach librarian, head of outreach, learning, and research services at the River Campus Libraries, with interests in engaging pedagogy, instructional design, assessment, and creating professional development opportunities. She has been a founding member for programs like LILAC, the 3 Ts, and RISAC. Amanda Spence is a consultant at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, where she works with small independent healthcare practices to help them better utilize their EHR systems. She is a graduate of SUNY Geneseo's BA program in International Relations, minored in anthropology, and is currently an MPH candidate at New York Medical College pursuing her master's in health policy and management. She is interested in the intersections between community health and wellness, technology, and social justice. In terms of the format for today, each team of presenters will speak for about 15 to 20 minutes. We will then have about 5 minutes of questioning for each presentation team after each presentation. If time allows, at the end, we will have additional discussion based on your questions, which might focus generally on issues related to both presentations or individual questions for the teams if those are the conversations you'd like to continue. To ask questions, I ask everybody to use the chat and put your questions into the chat, and I will just call on people to speak out their questions when the time comes. If you prefer not to do that, you can just say, no, please read. And I'm happy to read questions for people as well. So with that, I'm going to unshare and turn this over to our first presenters.
Thank you so much, Deb, and thank you, Kim, for having us here today. And thank you, Sarah, for advancing the slides and taking care of that, because clearly I couldn't even unmute myself. So there we go. So I'm Denise Malloy, and I teach Writing 105, Creativity, Innovation, and Imagination. And one of the great things about our program is we get to design our own course theme. And so these are topics that I've always been interested in, and I really love teaching, and it's really fun to see how students tackle this. So within the course, we talk about topics such as artificial intelligence, animals and creativity, group versus solo creativity, schools and creativity. They have a lot to say on that topic. And we explore the dark side of creativity. And so within the course, it's a primary writing requirement. It's a 4-credit course. The goal is for students to build to an 8 to 10 page argument-based research paper at the end of the semester. And I always had my students do a short research presentation to the class, and it was usually a PowerPoint compilation. So how this came to be and how I started to visit with the librarians about developing this multimodal thing was sort of a 2-part convergence. The first was I attended Robin DeRosa's presentation on the UR campus. And she said something that resonated with me and it stayed with me. And I'm paraphrasing here, but the upshot of her quote was, all these great student assignments die in Blackboard. And I thought, wow, that's so true. You know, students are so excited about what they do. They come up with these amazing research projects, and yet it just doesn't go beyond the 4 walls of our classroom. And then about that same time, a colleague of mine invited me to her 105 sections pop-up research presentation. And I visited that and talked with the students, saw what they did. And I thought, oh, wow, I really would like to incorporate this into my course. And of course, I did what I always do. I visited with my librarians because they're my go-to folks on campus. And so the more I explored the notions of open pedagogy, the more I became convinced that this fits so well with my goals and what I wanted to do, and also with my philosophy of teaching. And I know, Sarah, you had some thoughts on this as well.
Yes, absolutely. So again, thinking about the course theme as well, which here was creativity, innovation, and imagination. So we really thought that thinking of the values and principles of open pedagogy with innovation and creativity, and we could really use this opportunity for students to share their work with the community and have that connection, and also have some learner-generated output. So we thought that this was a great opportunity to also collaborate with iZone, because their theme is all about innovation and ideation. So this definitely spoke to us, and Kim and I, with Denise, and decided to work with them for the program.
And so this was just another representation. And to me, it was really, no matter what way I visualized and conceptualized all these ideas within open pedagogy, it was like just such a perfect fit to me. And so I had always met and planned with the librarians. We always did at least 1, if not 2, research planning sessions to prepare students for the research paper, to teach them how to do the research, how to utilize our campus online resources, how to actually go into the stacks when we were on campus and find books, and kind of that magic that happens when you're actually standing there looking at the library stacks and seeing what's on the shelves. But this time I explained what I had seen in the pop-up session, and they also sat at the table with me at Robin DeRosa's presentation. So they knew I had been in on that. And they had these great ideas. And the first thing they suggested was, let's utilize, it's the Barbara J. Berger iZone, which is adjacent to the library in our Rush Reese Library Center. And so the iZone is this innovation hub, I guess you could say. It's a co-working space. It's very interactive. We have some images of it coming up in the presentation, but it's movable furniture, movable chairs, lots of whiteboards, Post-it notes. It's just very interactive. It has a great vibe. Students utilize the space, and it just felt like the right energy, the right space to try that. So we maintained our research session, of course, before all of that. And then we also wanted to talk about how to operationalize and set up an actual pop-up event, and how will students know what that means and what that looks like. Sarah, I'll tell a little bit how I got them prepped for the iZone session in class. So one of the things I had them do was just write about how could we envision your work in a non-textual format? So the first iteration of this was a little bit challenging because I didn't have any examples to show them. So we just kind of talked through it together as a class and brainstormed. So I had them do an informal writing assignment, more of a free write, to think about how could they see their topic lending itself to a non-textual format that you could talk to others about, that you could showcase what you've learned, what your argument is, and time and materials. So how would you actually make that happen? And so, Sarah, I'll let you talk about how the iZone session went, because you all put it together and ran it.
Yes. And so even before, initially, when we were talking about the course and the planning, so we had the first library session where we introduced students to skills for finding resources relating to their topic and how they can narrow down their research topic. And then about a month later, we planned for a session in iZone where students could really plan what the pop-up session could look like. So again, going back to the principles for open pedagogy, so they would have that agency and be involved in the planning process. And so initially, Kim and I were the librarians for the course. So we met with Denise and Zoe, who I actually see is present today from iZone, to talk about what it would look like and introducing students to design thinking. And we were first also thinking about where in iZone we wanted to have the session, because again, as we'll see in the pictures, iZone has a variety of spaces. They have some open floor plans where students can really move around. They also have some closed classrooms to do some of that work where they could concentrate. So we chose to do it in an open area where students could use the whiteboards and move sticky notes around and really have that energy to share their ideas. And this was the planning for the iZone workshop. And this is a sign that they had outside when we were planning it for this. And when we were at the iZone session, one of the things they did was to get the students start with the yes and activity, which you can see the sign here. So that's really thinking about just a scenario and what we can do. So maybe we want to go to a vacation. So this is what I'm going to do. And yes, and I'm going to take some stuff and plan, take these items. So really to get the juices flowing for the students so that they could think of creative ideas and then translate that into planning for the pop-up and the different aspects like marketing it, making their presentations and their promotions more engaging with the people who walk by the space. And that was one of the reasons we did the session in iZone so they could do the planning, and then planned for the pop-up to be in Lamb Square, which is on the main floor of the Rush Reese Library, which has a lot of traffic. So people from all across the campus and different years would walk by that area and would be able to engage with the students so they could really share their work with the public. Next slide. And well, here we have a picture of the space of the session. They had these whiteboards at the back and the students had some prompts, which we'll talk about, and they could move their sticky notes, and there were some things where they could use to do some prototyping as well.
And Sarah, I guess I should probably say, I forgot to say this earlier, that all the images and all of the student work that you'll see are all used with student permission. So I probably should have said that up front, but.
And so going on, when we were in the space when the students got in, the first thing we did was jumping into the session, introduce them to what pop-ups actually are. And pop-ups, I think this is in the chapter as well, these are workshops which are open to the public. And we really wanted to tell them that the nature is flexible. So what they do during the sessions is up to the students. They can have their works in different modalities. They could do video, audio, or they could do something physical. And just the idea is to have something interactive that they can show, so they can showcase their works to the people. So this is one of the slides where, with the whiteboards, where we asked students. The first question was, so how can we market the idea so that different members of the university community can attend? And we had 3 prompts on 3 boards, and we divided the students into 3 groups. So each of the group had an opportunity to move between the boards and put up their sticky notes. And once they had some ideas, you can see there are some stickies where they got very creative and made some diagrams as well, just to show what they were thinking of. And then if students had an idea that was related to that, so again, tying back to the yes and theme, they could paste that on top of the previous sticky note, just to say that, yes, I'm building off of this, and this is how we could market our event. And the next one was, how can we create a unique setup experience so that people would want to attend? So this was, again, another place where students had a lot of ideas. Maybe we could have some music and have a lot of colors so that the space stands out and is attractive. So they were very excited about the events. And as they were moving between the whiteboards, at some point, the eyes on staff also helped them give some prompts. So just so that they could think differently. So what if it had to be a silent event? What would you do then to make it more creative and more interactive? Just so they could have some different ideas. And then this was the third one. So it's how can we engage with the attendees so that they remember what they learned, or in this case, so that they would want to attend again. So they had some really fun ideas, maybe having a creativity passport, or like talk about time well spent. And then so those ideas were actually incorporated into the actual session. And I think the students really enjoyed that. Yeah, this is the one talking about students using it with unique experiences. And they talked a lot about incentives like food. So we managed to get some candy spread across the tables so that people could see that as well while watching their projects. And then this was, so first initially introducing them to the concept of design thinking, where design thinking is really a methodology where students can do some low-key prototyping and quick iterative thinking just to generate ideas to solve problems creatively. And that's, again, what we wanted them to think about throughout. So started off with the design thinking methodology and then tying that into what they were doing. And these are some of the things that we gave them to do some prototyping. So once they had these ideas, we introduced them to design thinking, and then we asked them to actually showcase what their projects could look like at the session. So they had a lot of threads and tires and cubes, and they could just create something with these materials. And students had a lot of fun with that, as we'll see in some of the pictures. Also, once we had these materials, we had 5 stations set up with different modalities. So there was music, there was audiovisual, there was data and video and physicality. And at first, the students were given the option to go to any table that they like, and they could just create something in that format using these things and prototype what their presentation is going to look like. And then after a while, they were asked to draw out a card from a basket and then move to a different table, just so they could do it in a different way and a different format that they hadn't used before. So these are some examples of the prototyping. And I believe this was one student who had actually used 3 different prototypes for the same project. And they were really excited with some of the different modalities. Denise, this was about improvisation and classical music. Denise, would you like to add something?
And the next slide was another one that went with that.
Yes.
So he visualized this project in 3 completely different ways during this 75-minute class period. And he was so into this. So it was fun to see him come up with 3 totally different ways to represent it. And I can't remember if we have a picture of his final product in here, but
slides. And this is the actual brusheries area and the pop-up. So this was a flyer that was created inspired by some of the ideas that students had about creativity. We had a staff member from the library who's brilliant with his designs, and he created these flyers, and they were put up across campus and also shared on some of the screens here. So this was a particularly exciting project. Denise.
So this actually was one image that was in the chapter, and I brought this in to showcase. In the first iteration, the students did a really great job of representing their argument, and her argument was about the creativity and prosthetic design for children having not only an impact on their ability to complete day-to-day tasks, but also on their mental health. And I thought she just conveyed this so beautifully in this argument on the using the black and white on the left side of the image, and on the right hand side it's colorful. And I don't know if you can see, but in the stand she has all of these words that convey the positivity that it brings in a child's life. And I thought it was just a really amazing representation of her argument, and a really well done piece of artwork. She drew this, and I was delighted that she left it with me, because she was going to throw it in the garbage, and I'm like, no, please, I'd love to have that. So I had always tried to take a picture of their final product so I could have that to reflect back on as I was doing their grades. And in a few instances, I actually had an image of their prototype that they made during the iZone session. So it was really fun, and I thought it might be interesting to show what they created within the iZone session and how it actually turned out in the final product. So this student's paper was about mental illness and creativity, and it just visually sort of looks quite similar, obviously more detail, but I thought that was kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, it was great. As we were at the session, they were creating their prototypes, and when we walked to their tables, they were explaining how this would work, about people being at different levels and different values. And then they translated that into the actual work during the pop-up, which was wonderful. This was another great idea of like the table from creativity to conformity and how it really creates with the snakes and ladder game.
And I think it's fascinating how similar it actually looked in the final version to what she had created in the prototype. So this student talked about unconventional paths in music distribution and the creativity within that and the effectiveness in that. And so in the iZone session, she created the image on the left. The theme sort of shines through in what she actually presented in the pop-up session on the right-hand side. So this is actually a set of 2 slides. This student was totally into the iZone experience, and in this 75-minute session, which also included all of the group work and all of the design thinking activities, the student created this living architecture project. And so you can see there are skewers on the sides, and she made it where there was like a rolling film within this tree. And so her argument was about living architecture as a creative solution and a sustainable solution for some housing issues. And so she completed this within the iZone session. And then her final project is the next slide. And it transformed into this. So the one side on the right, she created what looks like a tree. On the other side, she had the interactive, she still had the skewers, and invited students to write responses to different questions about would you consider this and how might this work? And there were also some sticky note activities along with this, but I thought it was a really clever representation of her argument. And Sarah, I'll let you explain this because you understood what she did.
Yeah, I mean, all of the projects are wonderful, but I was really fond of this one where, so the student was talking about gender gap in computer science, and on the right side, she had some graphs and this interactive some sticky notes where she had a few questions about just guessing the numbers, and you could pull those down and see what the actual answer was. And on the left here, she had some representations of the programming language called Scratch, which is actually a wonderful way of getting people introduced to programming. It's very low-key, and all it is, it's generally, they have a lot of commands, like over here, if you can see, it says go to mouse printer in different colors. And that's actually how the program is oriented, where they have different colors that are assigned to different actions, and you can move those on the screen and essentially learn how programming works and what kind of commands you can do to a computer. So I thought this was really great. And all of these stickies could be put up on the whiteboard and people could create different commands. Very exciting.
It was so above and beyond. It was great. And then these are just a couple of just the final projects I did. I'm sorry I don't have what they completed in iZone. And one argument was about wearable technology. And the other, and Sarah, I want you to chime in on this too. The student was arguing about creativity that protesters were using, and it was in Hong Kong. And he had a loop of the actual protests playing. He designed with the plastic, I guess the army figures on the side, had invited students to, move them and create their own. And then the student had them on the right-hand side, the blank cardboard that you see. They could write creative protest slogans, and they could also move the plastic pieces and envision their own ways of creative protest. So it was very interactive. Students really enjoyed visiting that and talking with him about his research.
Yes, and at that time, the protests in Hong Kong were very much on the news. So it really tied in very well with the current events as well, and was very creative. So
of course, we reflected on, how it went, what we learned, and a couple of the things that I think would be important to share. In the first iteration, the students did a really terrific job with conveying their arguments in the project. However, we noticed that they weren't as interactive or short for engagement. So the goal would be for someone to come in and be able to visit all of the tables for 15 students in our 75-minute class period. So about a 3 or 4 minute visit per station would be ideal. And like I said, students did really creative projects. I had a student do a podcast. It ended up being a 30-minute podcast. It was terrific, but not that short interactive piece. So we realized that was something we wanted to key into on the next iteration and talk about how we might convey that. The other piece of that was the first time, as I mentioned, I didn't have any samples to show the students. And so I put out a call to former students, if I could borrow your work to share with others. And so I created a gallery walk within the classroom. I used candy. We had candy at the stations. So they went around in peer teams and kind of talked about what they saw, how they could perhaps make it more interactive. And also talk about, could they envision that particular project in another modality? So kind of getting them pre-thinking about those different modalities that we would talk about in the iZone session. So having a tangible thing for them to see was really, really helpful at conveying that. So that was a good thing. The other thing we learned was about the timing of the session. The first go round, we did it a little bit too late in the semester in retrospect. And it felt like it added a little bit of stress because they didn't quite know how to envision this. It also coincided with the Thanksgiving holiday break. So there were a lot of pieces. So we decided it would be more beneficial to move it earlier. And it was much more helpful. It also had, it flows into the next piece, engagement with the writing and the writing project. We introduced it a bit earlier in the argument-based research paper assignment. And what I discovered, and this was just one time, so I'm hoping to look for this again, is they were able to articulate their argument in a little bit of a different way, sort of brainstorming in the classroom, talking it through. and talking about it in a different modality than a paper, I saw some students who were apprehensive about writing get very excited about the writing process. So that was really fun to see. It may have been just this particular group, but I think it had something to do with being able to think of it as more than just an 8 to 10 page writing assignment. So that really helped, and I'm hoping that's something that I see carry through in the future. Finally, the shift to online learning, the emergency shift last time was just, everybody was stressed. So I ended up just dropping the project completely. In this last semester, I was going to ask them to do it, but everybody was in such different situations. I didn't want it to be stressful. I really wanted it to be fun, and just their faces on the screen, they didn't look like they were having fun. So instead, I invited them to just write about it in 2 ways and envision, if time, money, and space were no object, how would you do it? What would you need? And if we were actually going to do this, just write about it, describe it, very low key. And they kind of had fun with it. And I made it optional if they wanted to do something. I actually had a student do, it was like a short animation, and the student used stuffed animals in the room to represent it. It was very, very clever. I had written her to see if I could include that, and I hadn't heard back from her, but I did have one student take me up on it. And so that was, the online situation would require a bit more thinking through, but hopefully we'll be back in the classroom soon and can get back to normal pop-ups, which are so much fun. So Sarah, anything else?
Yeah, I'd say that was it. I think definitely going forward, we can definitely think of more ways to do this online and have some ideas. But I'd say the timing of the Eyes On sessions and sharing the lessons learned, that had a really big impact on the pop-ups. With the second iteration, they were definitely, the students' projects were a lot shorter, but and more engaging. And I think that was really wonderful with some of the changes we made. So hopefully going forward, we can continue with that.
I'm going to say thank you both very, very much. And sort of looking at time, I'm thinking maybe we'll just move into the next presentation and hold all questions to the end if folks are okay with that. But I have questions, but I'll wait. It's fabulous.
Well, as that gets started, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming and hearing Amanda and I and the work that we did. The quoted section that you see in this title actually lends itself to the immersive and internalized nature of the course that we're about to detail for you. This particular model took place over 3 fall semesters, and the students really got in the immersion, in the experience, to the point where they had to remind themselves they weren't actually going to the place where they were studying, because they had just, gotten so involved in the learning process of this particular course. So the course is Third World Development. It's an anthropology course that was annually offered as an upper level course within the electives at SUNY Geneseo, which is a small liberal arts college, which is about 30 miles south of Rochester, New York. What Amanda and I will discuss pertains to the course design between 2012 and 2014. There were other iterations of this course, but this particular time frame is going to be important to remember. So the 2 college emblems that you see at the bottom of the screen here, SUNY Geneseo is where the coursework took place, and University of Rochester is where I am right now, and where the coursework was formally documented in the Open Pedagogy Approaches book. So for efficiency's sake, we're going to move to the right side of this screen, and let's see if I can move my here. So I'm Kim Hoffman. I'm Director of Learning Initiatives for the River Campus Libraries at the University of Rochester.
And I'm Amanda Spence. I'm a former student from SUNY Geneseo, and I currently work at the New York City Department of Health as a consultant.
And our third author, who you see on the left side, really can only be here with us in spirit. Dr. Rosemary Carici was our faculty collaborator and a true inspirational leader, both at SUNY Geneseo and within her applied anthropology work in Haiti. The last class that I taught with Rosemary was Third World Development in fall 2014, but we had been working together since the early 2000s. For various personal reasons, each of the three of us had moved on from SUNY Geneseo by 2015, but we all felt it was important to document this course as it could serve as inspiration to others. So here's the sad part. Preachy worked with us to write the full chapter, and she was with us when we had the final release of the book. Sadly, we lost her a little over a month later after a long battle with cancer that began in 2015. So if you calculate those numbers, this presentation is in tribute of our dear friend. As Deb mentioned in the intro, this fourth section of the book is all about design. When Rosemary and I ran the 2012 to 2014 instance of the course, we did not know about OER. In fact, as I look back through the publication history of our current champions of OER, that could be David Wiley, Robin DeRosa, Rajiv Jangiani, the ideas of OER-enabled pedagogy were really just coming to the forefront. So that said, within this course design, you might hear hints of what could be OER-enabled pedagogy if we were to run the course again now. But at the time, we did not get to the 5R level of true open pedagogy. But as it was designed back in 2012, Rosemary and I leaned on each other's grounding in these different learning theories based on the previous decade that we had worked together and experimenting with lots of different ideas. So it's key to mention, I talked about there being other iterations of this course. It's key to mention the spring 2010 iteration of Third World Development, which became the catalyst for the ultimate course design that we're going to talk to you about today. The events of January 2010 served as the metaphorical ripping off of the Band-Aid that led Rosemary and I to become more experimental in our teaching. So here's the story. Rosemary had just returned to Geneseo from her fieldwork in Haiti on January 11th, 2010. The very next day, a catastrophic earthquake hit her homeland just as she was getting ready to teach Third World Development. Rosemary could not continue to teach the course as she always had, and she literally tore up her prepared syllabus and committed to focusing the coursework on relief efforts in Haiti. Thus began our road down open pedagogical design that admittedly at that time was not planned. The course structure took the shape of small groups who would each focus on a particular aspect of disaster relief. Through course readings and group research, the students would explore the issues facing Haiti, understanding the cultural underpinnings of the Haitian community, and they would look for relatable or comparable solutions to what Haiti was facing. The final product of that work was a poster that detailed each group's project. Okay, now on to our NGO model. I'll give you a quick summary of the course structure, and then Amanda will follow with her experience as a student. So first of all, where did the NGO idea come from? In the summer of 2012, Rosemary came to me after taking a hiatus from the course, and she had asked this question: how can I get my students to understand and or internalize development work? My answer: what if we made them development workers? So we didn't have a natural disaster to tie the idea of applied learning to. And we knew that following the model of NGOs could take students through the steps of what true development work looks like. Students would start at the very beginning of NGO work, meaning they would start in NGO organization in a simulated fashion. So they had to answer questions: where would we work? What would we focus on? How would we work with the local communities of the location that we chose? These seemed like really simple answers to the students at the beginning, but very quickly they realized there was so much more digging that they had to do before they made any kind of decisions. The major project was to build an NGO complete with a website and a final pitch for solutions that would answer a proposed problem that they gave. Rosemary and I scaffolded the course schedule with milestone mini projects so that with each new mini project done, the final project would come to fruition. The way we flip-flopped our Tuesday and Thursday experiences was definitely unique. Theoretical discussions based upon course readings took place in the traditional classroom on Tuesday with Rosemary. And then on Thursdays, the NGOs would come to the library and I would either teach some mini lessons on skills that would get students to those milestones, or they engaged in boardroom experiences where the NGO could really focus on whatever business they needed to get that project done. In those cases, Rosemary and I sat in opposite boardrooms so that we could be flies on the wall and give guidance as needed, but we really tried to stay out of the way. So as mentioned, the final projects included an NGO website, and they needed to find a name, they needed to come up with a mission and goals. They needed to create a final presentation that simulated a pitch of their ideas to prospective donors. And then there were peer evaluations of each other within the group. And then there were team leaders, and they would evaluate the participation of members in their group. Additionally, after the first year of this model, we decided that having students outwardly reflect on the process of development work would give us a window into their minds and measure to what extent the theory was matching up with the practice. So we'll be sharing some of those reflections with you a little bit later at the end of this presentation, but we've got a couple of reflections baked into this presentation as well. So here is basically the structure of the course as far as what students would be doing throughout the course of the semester. In the middle here, you'll see location. And so you can see that flip-flopping nature of the locations where students would have to go. You can see different due dates when things were due. And then over on the left-hand side, you would see the readings, and those would be those theoretical readings that would then apply to the practice that they did. In contrast, here is the second part of the semester. So this was after fall break, and you can see there's really not much there. And so this was a really good demonstration of how we front-loaded the first half of the semester, lots of work going on to get them ready to a point where those NGOs could just go in the second half of the semester. So to this point, and I won't focus on it too much here, this is a quote, one of the reflections from Amanda, and it's a great lead into her experience. But she talks about having no boss in those boardroom experiences, but yet how the group itself managed themselves and organized themselves and were really productive. So I'm going to leave it there. I don't know how much time I've taken, but it's on to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Kim. Again, my name is Amanda. I was a former student at SUNY Geneseo and had just the joy of taking this class with Dr. Siddiqui and Kim Hoffman. I spoke with her during a time when I was working in the Department of Health, and she's been my mentor throughout these years. And she mentioned this project she was doing with Kim and said, hey, would you like to join in to give the student experience? And of course, I was more than happy to dedicate some time to that. So I'm going to be talking about our project mark from back then. The first question we came upon was just, how do we develop an NGO? Where do we start? So what we had to do was sort of organize ourselves and figure out what the group dynamic was going to be like. We followed a very egalitarian structure, and then we divided ourselves into different pods to do research on certain topics and bring it back to the group so that we can then determine which topic we wanted to focus on. And then in selecting a topic, when we did research, we used several online library resources. We used social media sites such as Twitter, which was a huge revelation for us because we didn't know that we could use Twitter to find out information that we were looking for. And Kim was actually the one who introduced us to the ideas of like hashtags. Of course, we knew about hashtags back then, but we didn't know that hashtags can get you really specific to the point where you can find good literature and content for a research or ongoing projects such as this. And then we also had people who had relationships with those in NGOs or who were Peace Corps members. And so we tapped into those people, calling Peace Corps members and saying, hey, what is your experience like on the grounds? And they'd give us a little bit of tidbits so that we could figure out what our community might potentially need and what we would need to do as an NGO. And then from there, we also had the student experience. And so in the group, I think we were all very versatile. We all brought different skills and knowledge. And so there were people who had previously done NGO work as an internship before. And so they were able to deliver that information to us. There were people who were born in developing countries. And so they gave us the perspective of saying, hey, I understand we're doing this NGO work. I understand as an immigrant that sometimes we don't want to feel patronized, so how can we make it so that we increase communication between the two parties? We had people who were in previous classes in either development work or public health, I should say, geography, and that kind of all tapped into giving us more information on where we should go. Then the next thing we wanted to emphasize here was that once we came down to a topic of we want to focus on maternal child health care, we determined that prenatal and postnatal care should be distinct because we weren't going to be an organization who was going to deliver any sort of clinical services. We weren't, we didn't have the expertise for that. So presenting prenatal and postnatal care and presenting educational material and training community health workers was something that we felt that we could do without, getting too complicated. Then from there, we had to select a location. And I say that selecting the location was the hardest part of this, because we had to consider whether we wanted to stay in an urban area or if we wanted to go to a more rural area. And so what we've learned from the in-class lecture was that there tends to be a lot of NGOs that crowd around urban areas because that's where the resources are. It's easier to deliver services in an urban area. It's harder to go out into a rural area where the need is greater because there's less resources. Sometimes the roads are really choppy, and how do you deliver those services without it getting lost or damaged along the way? So when we were in the boardroom, I remember I was a huge advocate of going more rural because I figured we should go to where the need is. But then at the same time, people were like, let's be more realistic here. What would sort of be our inputs and outputs? How would we manage this whole situation? So that was a big thing. And then we wanted to see, okay, what kind of public health issues are unique that we wanted to focus on. Again, it was maternal mortality. And once we figured out our location, which is Putara Siparuni in Guyana, we chose that because we saw that there were high maternal mortality rates and there was a lack of public health infrastructure. There was a lack of proper equipment for delivery and issues of transportation. So eventually, yes, we did choose a more rural area, which made me very happy because I know I was fighting pretty hard in there. I left the room feeling pretty heating. And at that point, I think Chirichi even came up to me and was like, it's just a class, it's okay. And I was like, I want to make sure that these people get the help they need. So, but we did move in that direction. And so finally, we had to decide on a name. And I will say that this took about an hour and a half, a lot of class time, figuring out what will our name be, what would be a catchy phrase, what is something people can easily search. We knew that we wanted to keep the name simple and unspecific to Guyana, so we could potentially spread to other countries if the model proved to be successful. And we brainstormed several names such as Mommies and Make Your Mark. And then once we heard Make Your Mark, we were like, why don't we just name it Mark? Instead of having to have this full phrase, name it Mark. MARK stands for Mothers Advocating Reproductive Knowledge, which you can see there on the left-hand side is our banner on our website. Check it out. The link will be in here. And we felt like that was just perfect, so we ran with that. And at the time, we thought that name really exemplified our organization's goal to aid and advocate on behalf of mothers in the community we plan to work with. And we wanted the public to know that we were playing a supportive role in their expressed needs and taking a grassroots approach. So Mark really stuck with us.
These are from the website that Amanda built, But Amanda, as I go through, if there's anything that you want to really shout out.
This is our mission statement: improving maternal health care among women in Pataro Siparuni, Guyana. Then the next slide. From after delivering our mission statement, we had to figure out what our proposed development strategy would be. And so we also posted that on the website. This was our strategy was to collaborate with local nurses and to learn more about health issues faced by women of reproductive age, and then to train community volunteers so that they can take the knowledge and spread it within their communities on topics such as like vaccination, nutrition, maternal sanitation, and healthy pregnancy. And we offered 2 different methods of doing this on top of the trainings, which is individual and group sessions for the mothers who needed help within the community, who were pregnant in the community or expectant. This is just sort of how we executed our project. And again, like I said, we chose to do group and individual sessions. The group sessions focus more on preventative measures, and individual sessions focus more on the prenatal, postnatal care. And then these were supposed to be alternated bi-weekly, and just telling them about immunizations and breastfeeding and etc. And you can move forward. Here's just some of the pictures that we had from our website. I just wanted to share here. That's us training the community health workers. This is us teaching how to properly sanitize or healthy hygiene habits for your baby. And then the next one was just like vaccinations. All right, and then this is just a model of open pedagogy. And I just wanted to focus on 3 of the topics here. They are participatory technology, sharing ideas and resources, and learner generation. And so here is an old photo of us in the classroom. That's me, and that's my good friend Estefania Trujillo, who I think is on the call today, working on this assignment. So for participatory technologies, we created the WordPress website, and for sharing ideas and resources, it's important to have a very strong internet presence if you're going to share information and freely to your audience. It's also a great way of creating accessibility of information. And so what we loved about WordPress is that it was free, anyone could access it, and it's easy to navigate, and so naturally just seemed like a really good fit for us. And the good thing too is that you could share the webpage on Facebook and Twitter. There's an RSS feed that had keywords linked to it, such as maternal, newborn, and child health. And that inserted some more up-to-date content on those 2 topics to our website that people could link to if they wanted. And then learner generation is just the idea that, you know, if you give students the chance to take on projects and not only absorb the information, but have a part in the creation of it, and just like let them work autonomously, they will figure it out. And we did figure it out, and I loved it. It was awesome because it was the first time in my life I felt like I could apply this information in a very tangible way. And from it, we've created so many things that I can later discuss in the lessons learned.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kim and Amanda. We have about 2 minutes left. So if somebody would like to ask a question, any questions for thinking about both presentations together or for either presentation alone? Maybe I'll ask one question. It's now 2:59, but I do we know if this course will ever start again? Because my understanding, and maybe I misunderstood, and whether or not I would say, I heard from Denise and Siddiqui that their innovation grew out of another previous innovation. So I'm wondering if this inspired other innovations, Kim and Amanda, at your institution, and whether anything like this at all, even if not in anthropology, is continuing.
I guess that's kind of the impetus for why years after having taught the last session like this, we wanted to document it out there. We want to present it in this format. Of course, we did not know that we would lose Rosemary Carici, but she had retired, so it's not like she was going to teach it again.
Okay.
as you can tell from Amanda and I just loved teaching class. It was just so exhilarating. So yes, I mean, we would love to share it and see it, live on in other formats.
Well, I think we're at 3:00, so I am going to end by encouraging, I guess, saying thank you to all authors, presenters, but also encouraging people to take a look at the Open Pedagogy Approaches and, as listed here, the websites, because it does seem to me that part of the power of this is being able to share and build on what people have done and have it move forward. And I really personally hope that happens, because these are amazing experiences. So thank you everybody for being here today. Hope we all stay in communication somehow around this Open Pedagogy Approaches.